Good morning and welcome. So glad you could all join us today. My name is Warren Sainsbury. I'm the General Manager at Telco Together Foundation. We've had an incredible cross-section of people register for this webinar and attending today, cross-section of different roles, different organisations, different sizes. And that's just fantastic to have such a broad range of people. What we're doing here with this Domestic and Family Violence Action Framework is an industry-leading initiative, and it's the first of its kind, and we should be very proud as an industry to be leading the way with a collaborative response to DFV. This is a great example of what Telco Together Foundation do. We bring the telco industry together to address social issues collaboratively to make a greater impact than what you can individually. This is one stream of work that we do in the Industry Impact Hub, and the other area we address is modern slavery. Through Telco Together Foundation, we also have a program called Small Change, Big Change, where we raise money to support building resilient young Australians. So this is an important subject, and I'm so glad that you've made the time available to attend and learn about what your organisation can do in response to DFV. I'd like to pay my respects to the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung people of the lands in which I reside and acknowledge them as the traditional owners. I pay my respects to the elders past, present and future, and all Aboriginal elders of the other communities who may be here today. We pay our respect to the ancient wisdom of the continuous culture that has cared for the land, the waterways and the sky for many thousands of years. The subject of today's webinar is the Telco Industry DFV Action Framework. We'll hear from TTF Executive Director Renee Bowker about why this is important to our industry. And we'll talk a bit about the Telco Industry DFV Pledge. Karen Lavery, Impact Hub Program Manager at Telco Together Foundation, will walk you through the action framework. She'll explain how it can help your organisation make a significant difference on the issue of DFV and how you can use the framework, as well as the difference between the 4 action plans. We're also going to hear from Christy Ditchburn, Sustainability Principal at Telstra, Alexander Osborne, Head of Regulatory at TPG Telecom, and Jaspreet Manku, CEO at C9 Communications. We'll also briefly cover the important considerations and guidance when conducting DFV training and talk about reporting your DFV action. We'll then talk about next steps. So this subject can trigger memories or experiences for some people. If you need support, please contact 1-800-RESPECT on 1-800-737-732 or Lifeline on 13 11 14. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat function, not the Q&A function, and please include your name and organisation. We're not going to be answering questions via the chat function. We'll address them live during the webinar, so you won't be able to see the questions in the chat function. We've included spots at various places throughout the webinar where we'll address the questions. And any questions that we don't get to live today, we'll deal with after we'll send out answers to these questions. And so we are recording this webinar. So now we'll hear from Renee Bowker, Executive Director of Telco Together Foundation.
Hello, I'm Renee. I am the Executive Director of Telco Together Foundation, and we are so grateful that you have been able to take the time to attend this webinar on the Telco Industry Domestic and Family Violence Action Framework. Domestic and family violence is a significant issue within Australia and a really complex one. In the first webinar that we held at the end of last year, we heard from award-winning journalist Jess Hill, who was the author of See What You Made Me Do, about how domestic and family violence is the #1 law and order issue in Australia. It takes up around 40 to 60% of police time. And given that only 20% of victims and survivors ever go to the police, it gives an indication of how rampant this issue really is. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men have experienced physical or emotional abuse from a current or former partner since the age of 15. And unfortunately, this issue is one that is of greater relevance to our industry than to most. Telecommunications technology can be a lifeline, keeping victims and survivors in contact with their support networks, and also providing crucial links to support services. But unfortunately, it can also be a tool of abuse. Abuse of text messages, GPS and tracking apps for surveillance, even iCloud families sharing services can be used to traumatize victims. And in addition to this, telcos can often be the first port of call for somebody trying to escape an abusive situation. Whether it's ensuring continuation of service or adequate privacy on their service, or looking for financial hardship allowances. Every customer service and collections rep who might be dealing with customers, how they respond can either be a critical support, or it can be, or it can leave the victim survivor feeling helpless, or in some cases even increase the level of danger. And the work we've been doing at Telco Together Foundation through the Industry Impact Hub on the issue of DSV is to allow our industry to respond more appropriately to this issue. We are so delighted to already have had the CEOs of 5 of the largest telcos, Telstra, Optus, TPG, Vocus and Aussie Broadband, pledged to take a stand against this issue. And we're inviting every telco around Australia to take a similar stand. The Telco Domestic and Family Violence Action Framework, which Warren and Karen will be taking you through during this webinar, is a significant piece of work that has been developed over the last 18 months and assimilates a lot of the industry and government guidelines that have been brought together through a number of organisations. And through the action framework, we have developed an easy to follow how-to guide effectively for telcos of any size wanting to make a difference in this issue. I hope you enjoy the rest of the webinar and find it useful in understanding how your organisation can make a difference in this issue. And I implore you to become an ambassador for this issue within your organisation, to take the pledge, to make the commitment to take a stand against this serious issue that affects so many staff and customers. Thank you.
So as Renee said, you all have an opportunity to join these 5 leading telcos to pledge to better support customers and employees experiencing DFV. So the CEOs of these 5 telcos have already pledged and agree with the statement. We do not accept domestic and family violence in any form perpetrated to or by our customers, employees, or any person in Australia, and pledge to continually improve our support for victim survivors. They've made the commitment to carry out the 4 actions listed, including the creation of a DFV industry action plan. Each of these points in the pledge has been well workshopped and thought out, and it's your responsibility as an organisation to carry out these 4 points. Telco Together Foundation, along with our DFV Roundtable members, have provided the framework to enable you to do this. So all telcos who return the signed pledge to Telco Together Foundation by the 31st of May will be featured in our media release to the public, and we'll explain later in the webinar how you are able to make that pledge. So now it's my pleasure to hand over to Karen, who's going to go through the framework. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Warren, and good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. So as Warren said, I'm going to walk you through how the framework is helpful to you, how to use it, about the 4 action plans, and then there'll be an opportunity to ask questions. The framework and its content, including the action plans, is really helpful to you regardless of your size or type as a telco, and whether you're at an early stage or quite progressed in looking at this subject. Its structure, the structure of the framework and the content, is designed to help you in your efforts now and also into your future. It's a comprehensive document. As Renee said, we've consulted with a myriad of different organisations, government, in the industry, and telcos themselves. It's organised in 3 sections: preparing your action, and here this helps you get ready for taking action, looking at what you'll be doing and deciding on the action plan that is right for your organisation. The second section, taking your action, is where you'll find the 4 action plans themselves and the steps you'll move through when developing your chosen plan. And the third section, helpful resources, is full of resources and templates that we've put in the framework for you, which are referenced through the document and linked from the document through to our website. The structure itself provides checks and balances for joined up thinking across your organisation. The structure suggests teams to include and who to train and when. It assimilates thinking from other industry guidelines and reports, for instance, from Comms Alliance, eSafety, TIO, 1-800-RESPECT, WESNET, etc. You're guided through sequential steps for each action plan, and it makes it very easy to follow. We're really grateful for the published support the framework has received from Minister Fletcher, Minister Ruston, the eSafety Commissioner, the TIO, ACAN, Our Watch, and WESNET. Each of the 4 action plans is designed to be relevant for telcos at different points of your continuous DFV journey. You may all, at some point, engage in any of these action plans. For example, after implementing an embed, tailor, or influence action plan, it will be appropriate at some stage to adapt your approach. They're not linear. There's no implication that one action plan is better than another. They are simply a way of helping telcos engage with this subject and better support customers and employees and make a positive difference to this issue in society. Importantly, when we talk about DFV support, this is in the context of providing an appropriate response for a customer or employee. It's never implying DFV counselling, safety planning, or fulfilling the role of a DFV specialist or frontline organisation. It isn't appropriate for telco employees to provide advice to customers about their personal circumstances. And in some cases, as many of you know, this can trigger a person's danger. We'll be looking at these action plans in a moment. But first, I want to just give you a little information about how to use it. The 3 sections are color-coded, so you can easily find your way around and know where you are in the document, as you can see from this slide here. In addition, when you're within each section, you can also see where you are through a bar chart at the top. This example on the screen shows that you're in the taking your action area, you're within the embed action plan, and you're looking at the overview of the embed action plan. The dots to the right move you through the different areas of that action plan itself. So it's really easy to find your way around, and obviously you can scroll like normal as well. So looking at the action plans, let's look at the adapt action plan first. So this is the focus and intent of this action plan. You're acknowledging the importance of the issue. You're showing that you're taking responsibility to be able to respond appropriately. And you're showing that you have a commitment to being able to respond effectively. This action plan is really appropriate to your business if you are planning or at an early stage or reviewing your action plan. You may already have one in place, and you may want to look and see whether it reflects best practice and current thinking. Or you may have an internal employee strategy and policy, but maybe not an external one, or vice versa. This action plan is appropriate if you haven't taken any action to date, or if you've taken early steps. These are this is the process that you go through. I was going to use steps, but I've already used that. This is the process that you go through when you are using this action plan. You will be providing, exploring, consulting, reviewing, deciding, and reporting. As an example, you'd be providing support for your employees before undertaking any work. You won't know which of your employees are victim survivors or have had an experience with domestic and family violence. And it's very important that you put steps in place before you do anything to make sure that you're able to support those employees when you start discussing this subject. Exploring. The action plan has in it steps to explore government and industry expectation of telcos regarding domestic and family violence and other aspects of exploration. You'll be consulting internally, forming a cross-business working group, and we have information about how to do that. You'll be reviewing your interaction points across your business to be able to apply a DFV lens at all points that are relevant. You'll be making decisions, e.g., how you will develop your plan or the support you will provide for customers and employees, decisions on your training or how you will monitor and measure. And then you'll report using the action plan report template that we provide. This is an example of some of the criteria in this action plan. So as you can see, this is talking about consulting with colleagues and things to think about when you do that. If you're a subsidiary or a parent organization, think about that. Think about all the facing teams, customer-facing teams that might be applicable. Think about all the teams that are involved with technology itself. And think about strategy, HR, diversity, inclusion, etc. All this information is in the framework itself. It's recognized that some of the criteria in each action plan may not be relevant to some telcos, particularly if you're small in size. If this applies to you, that's not a problem. It's expected that you implement the intent of the action plan, taking a complete approach rather than a minimalist one. And when you put together your report, there'll be an opportunity to outline why criteria hasn't been relevant to you when you complete that. At the end of this action plan, this is what you will have completed. Your cross-business working group will have looked at the subject of domestic and family violence, how the issue can affect customers and employees, all business areas, processes, practices, etc., which domestic and family violence and technology facilitated abuse impact, and how your company can support your customers and employees that are experiencing domestic and family violence. So looking at the embed action plan, another one, this action plan, the embed and the tailor ones are both to do with implementation. So the embed action plan is for organizations that are able to provide support to customers, employees through your mainstream standard business processes that are already in place. Your employees have been trained in domestic and family violence support, but they don't have the authority to provide customized, tailored support wider than your mainstream standard business options. In this action plan, this is relevant, as I've just pointed out, for telcos that really are not able to provide a tailored response. And these are the steps that you move through with this one. You develop, train, implement, communicate, monitor and evaluate, and report. The only important difference between the embed action plan and the tailor one, which is it is the only difference really, but it is an important one, is the ability to provide a tailored response or not. In both, you will be carrying out these steps. So here is an example of the criteria in the embed action plan. So you will have been looking at your DFV strategy and developed it. And that will, for example, include your action plan for your customers, your action plan for your employees, your implementation plan, communication plan, your plan for monitoring and evaluating, and your reporting arrangements. You can see with this criteria that this is an example of how we reference some of the resources and templates throughout the framework. So this is referencing Appendix 6, Government and Industry Expectations of Telcos. So with this one, at the completion of this action plan, you will have developed your organizational DFV position statement, your strategy, your policies, your support processes, and your training. You will have implemented your training and your strategy, evaluation processes, and communication plans. Your teams will now understand what is appropriate to provide regarding customer and employee support and what is not. And we'll talk about training a little bit in a moment. And you will have increased your team's knowledge about how to recognize DFV, how to respond appropriately, and where to refer customers and employees to for support. So looking at the third action plan, Tailor, this is the focus of this one. So again, you're working through the steps of developing and communicating and implementing, etc. But when you do that, you're focusing particularly on providing a tailored response. In this action plan, your employees have been trained in the aspects of domestic and family violence, and they do have authority to provide a tailored response. Examples might be conducting your training, which would be DFV awareness training, DFV support training, and DFV tailored support training. So you might have a team that looks specifically at domestic and family violence and is able to tailor their approach to customers. Implementing your strategy, policies, communication plans, and so on. Communicating internally and externally, including how you're providing a tailored response. Monitoring and evaluating, and again, reporting. Here's an example of the criteria of the Tailor action plan. As you can see, it's quite similar to the embed one, but there's a focus on being able to provide a tailored response. So when you're looking at developing an action plan for your employees, for instance, or your customers, it includes, as part of that action plan, how you are able to provide a tailored response. When you have completed this action plan, in fact, before I talk about that, I think there's another important thing that we need to talk about the examples of tailored response. The reason we've created two action plans about implementation, one centered around mainstream practices and one centered around a tailored response, is because we know that some telcos find it challenging to do the latter. Here are some examples of types of providing a tailored response. Employees are authorized to offer highly flexible payment arrangements. Your end users are able to keep their mobile number. There are flexible ways to stay connected, e.g. prepaid mobile or internet services, and preventing a service from being automatically suspended or disconnected due to non-payment, or a range of options available in the terms of the obligation to return handsets if that's relevant to you as an organization. I'd now like to hand over to Alexander Osborne, Head of Regulatory at TPG Telecom, who's going to talk for 5 minutes about his work developing a tailored response. Alexander was very instrumental in the creation of the Comms Alliance guideline G660/2018, which many of you will be very familiar with. As you also probably know, this is currently being reviewed and revised, chaired by Annie Leahy, who is also in this webinar and is one of our DFV roundtable members and also at TPG Telecom. Alexander, over to you. Thank you.
I'm more familiar with Teams than I am with Zoom, so finding the buttons is a bit of a challenge. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you this morning. I think that I come to this with a personal background of domestic family violence. As a young man, one of my first jobs, I can recall quite vividly seeing a newly married young woman who I worked with coming into the office bearing bruises and black eyes, and it had a fairly significant impact. So I'm quite an advocate for the activity that we're carrying out here. If we go back in time, the domestic family guideline was developed through a working group at Comms Alliance that I chaired. The guideline followed on from an initial thought that we should have an industry guidance note. So following the Royal Commission and various inquiries that were held around 2017, 2018, I thought that we needed to lift our game in the telecommunications sector and that we should be doing something. And so with that in mind, we set up an industry working group. We included quite a number of telcos and support organisations for those who've been affected by domestic family violence. And we identified some things that would be of assistance, such as putting down on paper some of the issues that are of concern to those people who've been affected by domestic family violence. Hardship, of course, is one of the first things that comes to mind. And then, of course, there's technology facilitated abuse and what we could do about those particular circumstances. I think it's also important to note that when we're dealing with people who've been affected by domestic family violence, it's not always our customer. So we have in our world the concept of customer, and then there's the concept of an end user. And quite often it can be someone who's in fact the end user of the service, not the customer that's being affected. And so with that in mind, I proposed to the working group that we set about putting some arrangements in place that actually dealt with not just the customer, but those people who are end users that have been impacted. And so we deal with this on a more holistic level from the point of view of users of telecommunication services, not just the customer. One of the things that we put into the guideline was quite groundbreaking in its time, and I believe it's still rather world leading in that an end user through the arrangements in the guideline can get access to the number themselves. I note that in the US, in California, for example, if someone's been affected by domestic family violence, then they would have to go to a court, and then a judge in a court can make orders that a phone be handed to that person rather than the customer controlling the service. Of course, we deal in a rather complex technical world when it comes to regulation for telecommunication services, and we have to be guided by a range of obligations, such as in the numbering plan, but also obligations that arise from the Telecommunications Act, and of course the criminal code regulations. So under the Act, we're obliged to do our best to prevent telecommunications networks and facilities from being used to commit offences. We have provisions under the criminal code that a person who commits an offence, if they use a carriage service in a way that is regarded as menacing, harassing or offensive. And so some of the work that we've done as part of developing the guideline was also to leverage off of other work that I've been involved in relating to handling of life-threatening and unwelcome calls, which is included in a separate industry code. So the idea in the guideline that we developed came from things that we saw that we could kind of get around, if you like, what was in some regulations and what was really expected of us, both as socially responsible organisations. And so one of the things that we looked at was under the numbering plan, there is an ability to be able to terminate a customer service. And so under section 99, a carriage service provider can recall an issued number from a customer in certain circumstances. And of course, we're not obliged to provide services to customers. And so if we terminate the service, then we rely on that ability to then take the number away from the person that may be causing domestic family violence. And then under section 100 of the numbering plan, there's arrangements that allow a customer or allow a number to be given to a new customer, subject to the agreement between the carriage service provider and the customer. So leveraging off of those things in regulation, we went down the path in the guideline of recommending a process whereby an end user could gain access to the telephone number that they've been using, recognising, of course, that for many people, the telephone number is their lifeline to their social network, a whole range of support services, used for banking and so on. So access to telephone numbers has become even more important in our world today than any time in the past. On the TIO website, the TIO has been across the changes that we've put in through the guideline. And so there's a particular call out on the TIO website that customers or end users may be able to keep their mobile number even if the service is not in their name. And of course, we've encouraged that approach through Communications Alliance. I think that there has been an issue that there's been inconsistent take-up of the process, and so that's not been helpful for some people, and that's something that obviously needs to be addressed. And with that in mind, I'm currently chairing a working committee that's reviewing the use of numbers code to look at making very clear in that code a process by which, or enabling the ability for an end user to gain access to their number. There's work that's currently going on, as was mentioned, that the guideline is currently being reviewed. So together with the work that's going on in the use of numbers code, the current guideline is being reviewed to bring it up to speed with some recommendations of things that we've learned by way of experience over the past few years. And that work is in Annie's capable hands to bring that guideline up to date.
Fantastic, Alexander. Thank you very much. That is really helpful to hear, because I mean, we as a organization, we hear quite a lot from telcos about their struggles to know what they can do and what they can't do regarding what we're calling providing a tailored response. So it's great to hear that you're doing this work and that it will flow through into the next revision of the Comms Alliance guideline and also the other work you're doing about rights of use of number. Thank you very much for speaking. There'll be an opportunity to ask Alexander questions in a moment, if you would like to. Just for the attendees, the current Comms Alliance guideline, it's section 9 that specifically talks about this, that Alexander has been pointing to. And also another thing that you might find helpful to know is that Alexander talked about the TIO, and the TIO systemic report of 2020 is also reflected in one of our appendices, which is the DFV training framework, where we have specific advice and suggestions from organizations, including the Comms Alliance and TIO, about the types of situations that telcos might be presented with a customer that may be experiencing domestic and family violence, and potential responses that telcos can take in those situations. So just wrapping up the Taylor action plan itself, at the completion of this action plan, you will have developed your organizational position statement, your strategy, your policies for customers and employees, and your tailored support processes, and your training, including tailored training. You will have implemented your training strategy, evaluation processes, and communication plans, and understood what is appropriate, again, regarding customer and employee support and what is not, and increased your knowledge, as same as the Embed action plan, about how to recognize domestic and family violence, how to respond, and where to refer customers and employees to. Again, it's worth just saying that the framework has a resource which lists lots of different DFV specialist organizations and training organizations. So the last action plan is the influence one. The focus here and the intent is to expand your influence as a telecommunications organization, and a large organization in some cases, from supporting your customers and employees to driving change inside and outside your organization and in society. So this action plan is really about getting underneath the subject. It looks at the occurrence of domestic and family violence. It's appropriate to telcos, given the importance of the subject to our industry, really only when the telco has already implemented a well-structured support strategy for employees and customers, and have met the training targets that we have in the Embed and Tailor Action Plan, which is listed in the framework. It's also worth saying that the training targets, worth talking about that a bit, the training targets are not, they're targets. So if a telco has not reached those targets when they produce their report, we're asking for telcos to indicate their best efforts to do so and a plan for continuing to meet those targets. So getting back to the influence action plan, these are the steps that you work through regarding this one. There's a stronger focus on perpetrator support for your employees. There's also a focus on driving change internally and externally, communicating what you're doing to influence the subject, monitoring and evaluating, and reporting. Here's an example of the criteria of this action plan. So you might, for instance, when you're looking at driving change externally, promote your action plan and your CEO statement to your supply chain. You might engage strategically with other organizations and specialist organizations with the shared intention of reducing the influence of DFV. Or you might pick up on some of the focal points in the national plan and the new national plan, which is under draft at the moment. For instance, engaging the expertise of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander women and men, communities and organizations to lead in the creation and implementation of community-led solutions to build and manage change. At the end of this action plan, when you've completed it, this is what you will have achieved. You will have expanded your influence as an organization from a focus, singular focus on your own business only, to helping to reduce instances of domestic and family violence in society. So I've mentioned the third section in the framework being helpful resources. Here's a list of the resources and the templates that we provide. I mentioned also that there is an appendix with suggested specialist DFV support organizations. These are organized by national and by state and by subject. There's also a list of specialist training organizations. And when we say specialist, we're meaning organizations that have a specialist knowledge in domestic and family violence, because that's very important from a training point of view. Again, that's organized nationally, state, and by subject, because there are some subjects, for instance, like technology facilitated abuse, that very few organizations really have a specialist training focus on. So eSafety and WESNet are two. Another appendix is the telco industry training framework, which I alluded to earlier. This is divided into, this is guidance. We're not suggesting, there are only 5 subjects that we are saying are mandatory to include in training in domestic and family violence awareness or support. Everything else is just guidance for you to work with your DFV specialist organization to give them guidance and you guidance on the types of information that you need to include in your training. And the training framework is divided in 2 sections. It's general domestic and family violence information, and it's also information, as I said earlier, that is particular to the telco industry. Another appendix is the government and industry expectations of telcos, so the codes and regulations. There's also a list of resource organisations that you might want to look at their reports or guidelines, Comms Alliance being one of them, eSafety, etc. Quick exit and safety checks. Some of you know what that means, some of you won't know what that means, and so we include information about that, the difference between the two, and how to implement them in your business. There are also examples of internal and external DFV policies. We're very grateful that the DFV roundtable members that we have collaborated with in the production of this framework, which is Telstra, Optus, TPG Telecom, Focus Group, and Aussie Broadband, all have very kindly provided examples of their internal and external DFV policies to show you what they've been doing. Also include DFV statistics and a glossary of terms that are used in the framework. The templates, there are templates for each action plan report and also a template for the annual update. And I'll talk about both in a moment. But now I'm going to hand back to Warren, please.
Thank you, Karen. That's incredible overview of the framework and all the various action plans. We're going to take about 5 minutes or so to answer some questions. So we've had a few coming in. If you've got any questions, continue to put them into the chat function, and we'll address some now. After we've addressed these questions, we're going to hear from 2 more of our guest speakers. We'll address questions to them straight after they've spoken. Then we'll talk to you a little bit more about the reporting and next steps and wrap up. So I might just start with a question to you, Alexander. So just let you know I'm going to ask you a question so you can get ready for your... The question is that if a telco is being asked by a victim survivor to get access to their phone number, but they're not the name on the bill, what's the best action? How would you recommend that they can deal with that request?
So look, I think that first off, it's about making sure that you have the right terms and conditions for your customer. One of the things that was useful for Vodafone when we implemented it there was that we had quite broad standard form of agreement with terms and conditions that included that we had some general clauses around the use of the service and our ability to terminate the service should we feel it necessary. So I think that's one of the first things perhaps to look at. Then it's about, I think, recognizing that really we had a situation where we noted that it was becoming a more prevalent issue, and we set up a separate team to deal with these kinds of things. Now, I know that everyone's not going to have the luxury of being able to do that, but at least I think recognizing that's an issue and something that customers or end users will be looking for. It's about trying to put things in place in accordance with the guideline that support that process. But I think the first thing is to make sure you've got appropriate terms and conditions that enable you to have an ability to terminate the service to be able to then give it to the end user.
Thanks, Alexander. Thank you very much. Karen, I've got a question for you. And just very briefly, there's a bit of interest around the Taylor Action Plan. It's like just sort of a little bit more detail on how the Taylor Action Plan can benefit a telco.
Sure. Well, the Taylor Action Plan really, in addition to the deliverables in the embed one, so I'll just cover that first because the embed one and the Taylor one are very similar. In the embed action plan and the Taylor one, it helps the telco know what to put into the DFV strategy and the policies, understand what to include in the employee training, understand what to develop and and actually develop the work and carry out a structured internal and external communication plan, and importantly, put safety steps in place for customers and employees. So then, to answer your question about the Taylor one in particular, in addition to that, the Taylor one enables the telco to respond to individual customer circumstances. It gives the telco a structured approach all areas of the business, e.g. strategy, training, and communication. Does that help, Warren?
Yeah, thank you, Karen. And you know, we're going to provide more information to people after this, and we'll answer these questions in a little bit more detail. So yes, thank you. Look, I'll just quickly address one more question, and then we'll move on and hear from our other two guests. A question's been asked is, you know, how do we get this framework, and is there a cost? And the answer is yes, there is a cost for the framework. And the way you get the framework is you register on our website. But at the end of this webinar, I'll give you the exact details, plus we'll follow up with an email in the next 24 hours. But at the end of this webinar, I'll talk to you about the exact costs and the link on how you register to get the framework. So thank you so far for your questions. Keep them coming in through the chat function, not the Q&A function. Please ask questions via the chat function. Keep them coming in, and there'll be two more opportunities for us to answer questions coming up. So now, we're going to hear from our two guest speakers. We're going to hear from Telstra and C9 Communications, who are going to share their experiences around trying to better service customers and employees around DFV and some of the challenges they're experiencing. And we'll have a quick Q&A for both Christy and Jaspreet at the end. I'll be very quick and direct my questions to Jaspreet first at the end, because Jaspreet is kindly joining us from the airport before he has to quickly jump on a plane. So first, we're going to hear from Christy Ditchburn, Sustainability Principal at Telstra. So over to you, Christy.
Thank you, Warren. And I would first like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, who are the traditional owners of the land that I'm coming to you from. I'd like to acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander people on this call. It's been really wonderful to hear the experiences from Vodafone, and also Karen. It's been wonderful to hear the step through of the various action plans. We upfront would also like to really commend Telco Together on the work that you're doing to bring the industry together on this. The reason that it's important is because we know that telcos are often the first port of call for someone who is in a situation where they're experiencing domestic and family violence. Continuity of service is critical for people who are in these circumstances. It's important to stay connected, and it's also important to protect our customers' privacy and our security. We've recognised this for a long time at Telstra. We've taken a number of steps to support our customers and our staff. So I'll look forward to taking you through some of those. Way back in 2010, I wouldn't say it's absolutely the beginning of our journey. I think the journey goes on from longer than that. But in 2010, we signed up as a supporter of the White Ribbon Foundation. And from then until now, we have a range of approaches that we have to supporting victim survivors affected by domestic and family violence. So the first one is that we have explicitly recognised domestic and family violence in our financial hardship policy. So recognising that victim survivors can receive support through our specialised assistance team that we call the SAT team to stay connected and resolve debt issues. And that's been in place since 2017. we established that specialised team to manage domestic and family violence cases. This is a team of specially trained consultants who are specially trained to understand the range of circumstances that victim survivors may find themselves within. We've also launched mandatory training for all frontline staff to increase awareness of how to provide assistance in these circumstances. The last item I'd like to mention, and I think Karen mentioned some of the partner organisations. We partner with WesNet, who are experts in the area of tech facilitated abuse. WesNet worked with us to establish our Safe Connections program, and this program provides prepaid smartphones along with $30 credit to women who are impacted by tech facilitated abuse, and we've established that program back in 2014. There are challenges in this area, and we've acknowledged in a number of the speakers that these are really incredible and vulnerable and a wide range of circumstances that these customers find themselves within. So the most important place to start is that needs to be top-down and company-wide alignment on our approach to domestic and family violence. This also needs to be supported by a strong customer-centric culture where listening, respect and understanding of complex needs is acknowledged and flexibility is allowed for. So whereas in a call centre, call handling times are often a metric of success, in this type of area, it's not the right measure of success. Understanding the unique challenges of customers in domestic and family violence situations is critical. We know Telco, we're Telco experts, but we're not experts in tech facilitated abuse or domestic and family violence. That's why we work really closely with people like the WesNet people who understand this area much better than we do. And we consult with them on developing our products as well as consulting them on our processes to see how our products might be misused by perpetrators. The next tip is, this has been a long journey. I mentioned at least 10 years. In 2010, we signed up to the White Ribbon Foundation. It's been even longer than that. This is not something that, this is not a cultural change within an organisation that happens overnight. And implementing an action plan is a wonderful start, but I think we need to be realistic in the speed that an organisation can really change. But it takes that commitment that we mentioned from the top and across the organisation, and then change can be achieved. Which brings me to the last tip, which is reflecting, listening and learning. And we are continually reflecting and listening and learning and improving what we want to, what we can do to service our customers the best way that we can. Some of the challenges are retail stores tend to have higher turnover, and in our call centres as well. So we need to keep our training front of mind, and we need to ensure that new staff are trained, and that training is a very important critical part of the work that our front of house staff do. We need to make sure that the processes are really simple and easy to follow. Our front of house staff, a domestic and family violence victim survivor could come to us by any number of channels, and all of our staff are trained to recognise those types of circumstances. But it is a very delicate and a sensitive type of area. So to identify those type of areas, and then for our front of house staff to make sure that those victim survivors get to the specially trained consultants to help them is challenging. What we can do is to make sure those processes are as simple as they can be. How do you measure success in this area? I mentioned earlier that the number of calls coming into our call centres and the call handling times that we have for these type of calls is not going to be a measure of success. What we try to focus on is that we're resolving the issues for our customers, and that we are supporting our customers who are in the most difficult of circumstances. We think that we've done some really good things and we're proud of the work that we've done so far. But as I said, we're not resting on our laurels, and we're really looking forward to working and continuing to work with Telco together and to develop our own action plan based on the principles that have been developed with Telco together. And I'm not sure where we see ourselves, but we'll certainly be heading towards the influence side of the coin. But I think we've still got a long way to go, despite the work that we've already done. So we'll continue to reflect, listen, and learn, and keep supporting our customers who need it most.
Christy, thanks for that, and thanks so much for the words of support for us and the work that we're doing. And you know, it's incredible to hear about your specialised team, that you've got a trained team. And I'll come back with a question about that in a minute. So now we're going to hear from Jaspreet Nanku, who is the CEO at C9 Communications, and he's going to briefly share experiences and from a very different perspective, from a very different telco. So Jaspreet, over to you, and thank you for joining us from the airport.
Absolutely, thank you very much, Warren. Hello everyone, my name is Jaspreet Nanku. I've been part of the telco industry for about 15 years now, and I currently operate a small growing telco called C9 Communications. I'm very grateful to Cam, Karen and Warren who've given me the opportunity today to speak here today. Like being a small telco, we may not have the scale or reach of a large telco, but the point is, in a small telco, you meet all your customers, meet all your employees, every day. You speak with all your customers very often. So you naturally start building a relationship with them. So for a small telco like us, there is even a more genuine want to be able to assist these victims of domestic and family violence. I would assume the same from the victim's perspective as well. They would also feel a lot more comfortable sharing their issues with us. And therefore, I definitely believe that small telcos have a very meaningful part to play in this integrated solution to domestic and family violence issues. Saying that, however, if you do a reality check, there are certainly a lot of challenges for us to overcome. And I'd like to talk about the two challenges that come to my mind at the moment. Challenge number one would be lack of dedicated resources. You know, as you would appreciate, that small telcos like C9 Communications usually don't always have dedicated resources who can just focus on designing a DFV plan or dealing with such matters. For that same reason, we don't have anything structural in place at the moment, to be honest, but we are in the process of looking at it. The framework and the action plan that has been discussed today will certainly help me in understanding the areas that I'm unsure about, that I was unsure about. And through the telco industry DFV action plan, it will be easier for organisations like us to look at one reliable source of any compliance codes that may be required to deal with such matters. Now, talking about a solution to this challenge, I would probably look at a model like just like how we've structured our technical support based on the level of support required around level 1, level 2, or level 3. Now, similar to that, we could possibly look at support tiers for victims, inquiries across 3 tiers, where tier 3 being our customer service help desk, who could be trained to respond to the initial contact by the victim. Tier 2 could be part of senior management who could speak with the victim in more detail, perhaps being able to report the matter to the police on victim's behalf. Now, I'm not sure if that is feasible or not, but we can certainly discuss if contacting police on behalf of the victim would be appropriate. Tier 1 could be some sort of external professional assistance. It may be some sort of help we can offer the victim, perhaps around blocking calls or certain text messages, just as an immediate relief for the victim. Now, the second challenge that comes to my mind would be around the capacity or willingness to deal with ACMA while overriding any compliance code to offer help to victim. Now, what's interesting to note here is that small telco is usually a customer of a big telco, either through a distribution or a resale model. Small telcos can leverage this supply chain relationship to rely on bigger telcos for extended support, especially when action is required on things like number port for a victim without the authorizer consent, because of the situation. I believe that it would be much more feasible for a bigger telco to deal with ACMA on the complexity that may arise in this situation as compared to a small telco like us. We could even perhaps look at teaming up a small and a large telco together and integrating the support mechanism between the two organizations to always ensure the victim is offered assistance promptly. Now, just before I wrap up, I would appeal to everyone involved that we should make considerations such as cultural differences and country of origin when developing the framework to ensure we cover everyone in need, especially in our industry where we serve a multicultural society and deal with supply chains that extend beyond the borders of Australia. Thank you once again for everyone for giving me the opportunity to speak here today and present my thoughts on this special matter. Thank you.
Jaspreet, thank you so much. It is really incredible to hear from the two different perspectives from two different size organisations. Look, Jaspreet, I think you may have covered this. Just one very quick question for you. I want to address the question to you first so that I can then let you go if you need to take off. But I think you sort of covered this, but very, very briefly, as a small organisation, do you think that there's any time that's better to, to start this journey or just start now? Jaspreet, you're on mute, Jaspreet.
Hear me now? Sorry.
Yep.
Yeah, I've got a lot going on in the background, so
yeah, that's okay.
Apologies for that. Yeah, look, it is definitely an important issue that I believe organisations of all sizes need to be involved in. From our perspective, we would implement all of this in stages and grow, and basically grow the whole process and improve the process as we grow. And when it all happens, it would most likely sit with our HR resource who will be able to dedicate time to ensure the processes are refined and are running efficiently.
Excellent. Jaspreet, thanks so much. I'll let you go if you need to.
No problem.
Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Warren. Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're very welcome. Christy, just a quick question for you. What sort of specialised training has your, I think it was the SAP team, undertaken?
So this, our SAP team is the financial hardship team. Our specialised team looking after domestic and family violence is our SAFE team. And our SAFE team undergoes specialised training, really recognising the nuances of the circumstances within domestic and family violence victim survivors and the circumstances they might find themselves in. It's about working with a customer who is in a very vulnerable and potentially emotive type of position and giving our front of house staff the tools and the support to and the frameworks to help to have those difficult conversations, but also to get to an outcome that is going to support the customer through those difficult circumstances. So, as I mentioned, we have the mandatory training to all of our front of house staff. So there is, and that's an online type of module, and that goes to all of our staff, so that they can identify at a high level where and look for those identifying areas that might suggest that a customer is in that type of circumstance, and to understand what those circumstances are in an empathetic, a flexible and a sensitive type of way. There's also the importance of looking after our own staff after having those really difficult conversations and that secondhand type of trauma. So we provide support for our teams who are having those type of conversations from that perspective. The only other thing I'll mention is that we also work with WesNet, who gives some deep dive training to our SAFE team as well in relation to tech facilitated abuse, so that those frontline, so that the SAFE team can have even more tools and information at their disposal.
Thanks, Christy. Thank you for that answer, and thank you for your time and presentation today. And that answer is an incredible segue, actually, now into Karen's briefly going to talk about the training considerations and the training part of the framework, and then we'll answer a couple more quick questions and wrap up the webinar. So I'll hand back to Karen now.
Okay, thank you, Warren, and thank you very much, Christy and Jaspreet. Wonderful. So this is all in the framework, so I'm going to just cover this very quickly. The first thing is to, as Christy said, discussing anything about domestic and family violence can be a challenging and difficult situation for employees. So the first thing is to make sure that you have supports in place for your employees before you take any conversation regarding this. The second is to make sure that you have conducted training before you're providing a response to your customers. The third is to work with a specialist organisation that is knowledgeable about domestic and family violence when you are developing your training. And we're saying that that is essential because of the complexity of the subject. It's not essential to work with that organisation for the delivery of your training. However, we say that it is recommended to do so or to deliver it jointly. It is also important to think about refresher training as your organisation changes and as you have new employees and as technology facilitated abuse changes. And lastly, have a look at the training framework, one of the appendices, because there's a lot of information in there. And as Christy talked about, DFV awareness training and DFV training for your support teams, and the types of information that you would be including in both of those training areas. So we're going to have a quick look at reporting. So there are two types of reports that we provided templates for both. One is the action plan report. There's an action plan report for each of the action plans. It needs to be signed by the CEO, and those that have pledged so far to produce an action plan, which is Telstra, Optus, TPG, Vocus and Aussie Broadband, each of those pledges have been signed by the CEO and the report will be signed by them. The template that we've provided matches the criteria in the action plan itself. So the report is very, very easy to fill out. It is completed after the action plan has been finished. You have finished the work with it. TTF undertakes a very top level quality assurance process just to make sure that the report has been filled out correctly. And some of the content is public. And this is really clearly marked in the report itself. So the report isn't public, but some of the content is. Okay, so this is an example of when you see the report, you can see here that the subject, we have developed a DFV action plan for our customers, is public, but the definition of what a vulnerable customer is not, but how you support your vulnerable or marginalized customers is. When you have completed your action plan report and it's sitting on the TTF, the public bit of it is sitting on the TTF website, you'll then receive a badge or a logo indicating which action plan you have completed. There's also an annual update, and this is a very, very short form. In some cases, it's just literally 3 questions for a telco. The maximum is about 11. And this is only relevant when a telco has completed their action plan and the public part of it, the report, is on the TTF website, because this is giving an update to your stakeholders about how you're progressing. I mentioned earlier that the training targets, as an example, are targets. So you might not have completed all of the training, and in the annual update, you can say how you are progressing and where you have conducted training now. It also gives you an opportunity to talk about the challenges and the solutions that you've come across. And again, we undertake a quick quality assurance process. You can complete this annual update, and in fact, the report itself, at the time that suits you. So if you prefer, you can do it at the time that you're doing your RAP report or your sustainability report, or whenever suits you best. This report is public. Okay, so I'll hand back to Warren now. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. So we're going to address just 2 questions at the moment because we have a few more, but we'll address 2 quick questions and then I'll wrap up and let you all move on with your day. One question I'm going to address to you, Karen, if you could briefly answer this question, which is, has there been any thought about how these plans and their reporting might integrate with other plans or commitments in the CSR space, i.e. reconciliation action plans, diversity inclusion plans, or financial inclusion action plan?
Yeah, sure. Yes, we looked very closely at the RAP when we developed this training framework. We also looked at what Thriving Community Partnerships is doing. We looked at Champions of Change, Coalition, so many different organizations regarding reporting and diversity and equality. We looked at the work of Our Watch, etc. And we have made the reporting timetable fluid to enable a telco to be able to report at a time that suits them. The other thing that is really important is that this points to why it is important to have a cross-organization working group, because you really need to have the people that are working on the diversity and inclusion plan, the people that are working on the sustainability plan, the people that are doing the RAP, the people from financial hardship, etc., all working together to be able to have a joined up approach. So yes, we have looked at that. Yeah.
Thanks, Karen. Look, the second question I want to address now, which is probably, we'll address 2 questions in one. And the question is, can we access the framework to get the insights and advice on training and actions, but not actually submit an action plan externally to Telco Together Foundation, because I want to get the insights and expertise? And sort of wrapped in with that is another question, is about what's your expectation around when we need to submit an action plan? So I think the answer to the second point might answer the first point, is that we don't have any expectation, but other than to say that it could take a number of years. Depending on the size of your organization and where you are, it could take a couple of years before you're able to produce your first action plan. So I guess the answer is, can you get it and use the insights and the learning without developing an action plan? Yeah, sure, absolutely you can, and we encourage that. But obviously the goal is we'd like you to produce action plans. So we have a few more questions, but we'll address those in writing via email after that. After this webinar. So I just want to wrap up now and give you the details on how you can access the action framework. First of all, as mentioned earlier, the 5 CEOs from Telstra, Optus, TPG Telecom, Vocus and Aussie Broadband have taken this pledge, which you can see published on our website, and we do now encourage all of you to do the same. And here's how you can do that. You visit the Industry Impact Hub website, so the address is on your screen right now, where you'll be able to take the pledge and register to get access to the action framework. So answering the question earlier around how you get access and the price, so this is how you get access by going on and registering. The framework is free for any organisation with a turnover under $10 million, as well as all of our roundtable members who have helped develop it, get the action framework for free. If you have a turnover between $10 and $100 million, the framework is $2,000 plus GST. And if you have a turnover that's greater than $100 million, the framework is $4,000 plus GST. All Telco Together Foundation members will receive a 50% discount off their relevant category. So within the next 24 hours, you'll receive an email from us, and the email will include that pricing again. It'll include links to the website so you can take the pledge if you're ready to do so, and to register to get the framework. As well, you'll get a recording of this webinar. We'll also follow up with you in the coming weeks, especially any of those that have registered for the framework and the pledge, and to discuss with you how we can support you further in your journey on developing an action framework, and even answer any questions for those of you who aren't members of Telco Together Foundation that are interested in becoming members of the Telco Together Foundation. So that's all for today, and I want to thank everybody for attending, and I look forward to all of us making a difference in the lives of affected people. I really want to thank our guest speakers, Alexander Osborne from TPG Telecom, Christy Ditchburn from Telstra, and Jaspreet Manku from C9 Communications. As well, Mark Sulikowski, Senior Advisor, Strategy and Inclusion at Telstra, has helped us out behind the scenes today, and we'll thank you for that, Mark. And also, very importantly, want to thank the Telco Together Foundation team who have worked tirelessly to put this together. So Cam Foley, Karen Lavery, and Renee Bowker. And of course, thank you for attending and listening to us today, and really look forward to touching base with you all after you've got a copy of the framework, and discuss how you can use it and help you on your journey. We're going to leave the webinar open until 11:30 in case there are more questions. Submit your questions into the chat function. We'll continue to take your questions through the chat function until 11:30, and we'll answer those in writing at a later stage. Thank you once again, and enjoy the rest of your day.